Good evening, dear friends, and a very warm welcome to each and every one of you. Wherever you're listening from tonight, maybe tucked safely under the blankets, curled up in your favorite quiet corner of the house, or perhaps lying somewhere peaceful while the world slowly quiets down outside. I'm so happy you're here with me. Take a slow, gentle breath in. Let your shoulders soften and drop. Maybe pull the blanket or duvet up just a little higher and allow the day to quietly drift away. The Lang Mansion perched on the wooded hills above Palo Alto, California, in the autumn of 1952. An Art Deco jewel of polished white stone and geometric glass. It was the perfect stage for ambition and elegance. Guests moved through its salons like actors in a well-rehearsed drama, each playing the role society demanded. Then Victor Lang, a creator of the Lang algorithm, an early electronic mind of vacuum tubes and punch cards that could forecast stock movements with eerie precision, was found slumped at his mahogany desk, cyanide in his evening coffee. A suicide note typed on the machine beside him. The study door locked from inside. The local police saw despair, overwork, a genius broken by his own creation. But Hercule Poirot saw theater. Someone in this gilded cast was performing innocence, the role of the murderer. The curtain rises. Chapter 1. The stage is set. The drawing room of Lang Mansion breathed Art Deco elegance that autumn evening in 1952. Crystal chandeliers cast geometric patterns of light across polished mahogany walls. The air carried expensive perfume. Chanel No. 5 layered over Worth. So heavy, it almost clung to the velvet curtains, framing the tall windows. Fresh hothouse lilies and white roses stood in silver vases, their sweet scent mixing with faint traces of Cuban cigar smoke and rich furniture wax. At 10:30, the maid had entered the study with a fresh pot of strong continental coffee. She found Victor Lang slumped in his high-backed leather chair. The cup lay overturned on the desk, dark liquid pooling beside the humming Lang algorithm. A towering cabinet of vacuum tubes, blinking lights, and punch card readers that could predict stock movements with uncanny accuracy. The bitter almond smell of cyanide hung unmistakable in the warm room. A typed suicide note rested beside the machine. I can no longer bear what I have created. The study door had been locked from the inside. The key remained in the lock. No windows broken, no sign of struggle. By midnight, the principal players had gathered in the drawing room. Eleanor Lang, the widow, occupied the central sofa in a midnight blue silk evening gown that rustled softly whenever she moved. She dabbed at her eyes with a crisp linen handkerchief, shoulders shaking in perfect rhythm. Yet the handkerchief stayed dry. No mascara streaked her pale cheeks. Marcus Hale, Victor's business partner and oldest friend, paced before the marble fireplace. His rough tweed jacket contrasted with the smooth kid gloves he kept twisting in his large hands. He stopped occasionally to stare into the flames, as though grief required dramatic pauses. Lila Voss, Victor's brilliant young assistant, stood near one of the tall windows. Rain now battered gently against the glass. She clutched an empty champagne flute so tightly her knuckles showed white. Her simple black dress, silk, expensive, whispered when she shifted her weight from one foot to the other. Dr. Harold Finch, the rival inventor who had arrived only that afternoon for discussions, sat in a wing chair with the calm composure of a man watching someone else's play. His sandalwood cologne drifted faintly whenever he crossed his legs. He observed the room without hurry, green-gray eyes missing nothing. James Worthing, the butler who had served the Lang household for 15 years, moved among them like a silent stagehand. He offered fresh coffee from a silver tray, steam curling upward in fragrant spirals. Each cup he placed made the softest clink against polished side tables. The grandfather clock in the hall chimed the quarter hour. Its deep, measured tones rolled through the parquet floor like a heartbeat counting down to the next scene. Hercule Poirot arrived shortly after midnight, driven through the rain from San Francisco on an urgent telegram from an old friend in the city's financial circles. He paused in the arched doorway, small and immaculately dressed, his egg-shaped head tilted slightly as he surveyed the room. His green eyes gleamed with quiet interest. He touched his magnificent moustache with careful precision. "Bonsoir," he said softly, the word carrying across the sudden hush. "I am Hercule Poirot. I have come at the request of a friend who believes this tragedy requires a certain order and method." He stepped forward. The fire crackled warmly behind him. Rain tapped insistently at the windows. The scent of lilies grew stronger as he passed the nearest vase. But Poirot moved among them like a director entering a rehearsal already in progress. He noted Eleanor's perfectly timed sobs. He observed Marcus's steady hands despite the restless pacing. He saw Lila's trembling fingers and the way her gaze darted, not toward the body upstairs, but toward Marcus. He registered Finch's unnatural stillness and Worthing's almost invisible flinch when the clock chimed again. "Observe, mes amis," Poirot murmured, half to himself, half to the invisible audience he always sensed. "This stage, it is set with such care. The lighting perfect, the props exquisite. The actors, they know their marks. Yet already, very early, the first small slip. Did you catch it?" He made a tiny expressive gesture with his small, neat hands. No one answered. The rain grew heavier. A distant door closed softly somewhere in the great house. But Poirot arranged 3 crystal ashtrays on a nearby table until they stood in perfect symmetry. Satisfied, he drew himself up to his full, still modest, height. "The police see suicide," he continued. "A simple, tragic explanation. Overwork, despair. The machine itself drove him to it. Mais non. Hercule Poirot sees theatre. And in every theatre of crime, someone performs the role of innocent while secretly holding the most dangerous part of all." He turned slowly, green eyes moving from face to face. "Someone in this elegant cast has forgotten one small line, one tiny cue, and because of that mistake, the curtain will eventually fall on the truth." The fire popped, sending a shower of sparks up the chimney. Champagne corks had popped earlier in the evening. Now only silence remained. Poirot smoothed an imaginary wrinkle from his sleeve. "The stage is set. The players have taken their places. The drama has already begun." The stage was set. The players assembled. Let the drama begin. Chapter 2. Enter the players. The morning after the tragedy dawned grey and damp over the Palo Alto hills. Inside Lang Mansion, the library had been chosen for the first formal interviews. A long, high-ceilinged room smelling faintly of old leather bindings, fresh furniture wax, and the lingering trace of last night's cigar smoke. Tall windows let in muted daylight that caught on the crystal inkstand and polished mahogany desk. A low fire crackled in the grate, sending occasional pops into the quiet. Hercule Poirot sat behind the desk in a straight-backed chair he had personally repositioned for perfect symmetry. 3 objects rested before him: a silver fountain pen, a small crystal ashtray, in and a single white rose in a slim vase. He adjusted them once more until the alignment satisfied his sense of order. Each suspect would enter alone. Each would play their scene. Poirot would watch. Eleanor Lang arrived first. She glided in, wearing a charcoal silk day dress that whispered against the parquet floor. Her perfume, still Chanel No. 5, preceded her like a signature. She seated herself opposite Poirot, without haste, crossed her ankles, and folded her hands in her lap. The linen handkerchief from the night before was gone. Today, she carried nothing. Mrs. Lang, Poirot began gently. You will forgive Poirot if he asks painful questions so soon. The little grey cells, they do not wait for proper mourning. She inclined her head. Ask what you must, Monsieur Poirot. He tilted his egg-shaped head. And last night you told the police you retired to your room at 9:30. You heard nothing unusual. You slept until the maid's scream woke you. That is correct. Yet Mr. Hale claims he saw a woman's silhouette on the terrace sometime after 11. The rain had not yet begun. The figure wore a dark coat. He believes it was you. Eleanor's gaze remained steady. Marcus was mistaken. Or perhaps he saw one of the maids closing shutters. I was in bed, alone. Poirot made a small expressive gesture with his neat hands. You understand, madam, that truth does not rehearse. Lies, however, they often flow with beautiful smoothness. Her lips tightened for the briefest instant, almost imperceptible. Then the mask returned, calm, composed, grieving. Next came Marcus Hale. He entered briskly, tweed jacket still rough against his broad shoulders, and the kid gloves tucked into a pocket. He took the chair without waiting for invitation and leaned forward, elbows on knees. Let's get this over with, Poirot. Victor was my oldest friend. I want whoever did this found fast. Admirable sentiment, monsieur. Poirot smoothed an imaginary wrinkle from his sleeve. You say you were working in the guest wing study until nearly 1 in the morning, preparing documents for today's meeting with Dr. Finch. Exactly. The maid, however, recalls hearing heavy footsteps, male, on the main corridor staircase at approximately 11:15. She was carrying linens to the linen closet. Marcus gave a short laugh. Then the maid is mistaken. Or perhaps she heard me earlier. Time becomes elastic at night. Elastic, Poirot repeated softly. An interesting word. Yet you reached for your cigar case last night when speaking of Victor. Your hand did not tremble. A man truly shocked by sudden death often finds his fingers unsteady. Yet yours were rock steady. Marcus blinked once. I've seen death before. War, business, one learns control. Control, Poirot murmured. Mais oui. Control is everything in a good performance. Lila Voss entered next, hesitating at the threshold, as though crossing a stage line she had not rehearsed. Her black silk dress was the same as last night. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. She sat clutching the soft kid glove she had twisted all evening. Miss Voss, Poirot said kindly, you were Mr. Lang's closest collaborator on the algorithm. You knew its secrets better than anyone. She nodded quickly. I helped design the punch card sequencing. Victor trusted me completely. You say the final run last night was successful. The machine predicted a sharp rise in several technology stocks. Yes? Yet Dr. Finch told me this morning that Victor confided doubts only yesterday. He feared the algorithm had begun producing inconsistent results. Lila's fingers tightened on the glove. Victor sometimes worried before big demonstrations. It meant nothing. Poirot leaned forward slightly. You wrote him a letter, Mademoiselle, quite passionate, found slipped inside a book in his study. I cannot bear to watch you destroy yourself over this machine. Let me help you. Let me love you. Color flooded her cheeks. That was private. Private letters become public when murder enters the theater. She looked away. Rain tapped insistently against the window panes. Doctor. E. Harold Finch arrived next, calm as ever. His grey suit was immaculate. A faint scent of sandalwood cologne drifted forward as he sat. You are a rival inventor, Doctor, Poirot observed. Yet you came here yesterday. For discussions, you said. Friendly rivalry, Finch replied smoothly. Victor and I often compared notes. His work was brilliant, tragic loss. You sent a telegram to your laboratory in Menlo Park at 10:45 last night. The message read, problem resolved. Proceed as planned. Finch's expression did not change. A routine business matter, unrelated. Routine, Poirot echoed. How convenient. Last came James Worthing. The butler stood ramrod straight, hands clasped behind his back. His black coat smelled faintly of leather polish and wood smoke from tending fires. 15 years in this house. Aye, Worthing, Poirot said. You must have seen many performances. I serve, sir. I do not judge. You served coffee to Mr. Lang at 9:30. You locked the study door behind you when you left. No, sir. Mr. Lang preferred to lock it himself when working late. Yet the door was locked when the body was discovered, from the inside. Worthing inclined his head. So it was. Poirot studied him for a long moment. Loyalty is a heavy role, mon ami. Sometimes the actor grows tired of carrying it. Worthing's face remained impassive. When the last interview ended, Poirot sat alone in the library. The fire had burned low. Rain drummed steadily outside. He arranged the 3 objects on the desk once more. Pen, ashtray, rose, until symmetry was restored. You watch with Poirot, no? He murmured to the empty room. Each actor has delivered their lines, some with passion, some with calculation, some with fear trembling beneath the surface. But already, the mist cues accumulate. The mask slips here, a hand steadies there, eyes avoid contact. Truth does not rehearse, mes amis. Lies flow smooth, too smooth. He touched his magnificent moustache thoughtfully. The players had entered. But who performed truth, and who performed lies? Chapter 3. The First Act. The afternoon light had turned thin and silvery by the time Hercule Poirot returned to Victor Lang's private study. Rain still fell steadily outside, drumming a patient rhythm against the tall leaded windows. Inside, the room retained its warmth, the faint crackle of dying embers in the small fireplace, the lingering scent of bitter almond, now almost gone, overlaid by strong coffee someone had brought earlier, and the clean polish of mahogany. The long algorithm stood silent now, its cabinet doors ajar. Several vacuum tubes had been removed, deliberately, Poirot noted, and placed in a neat row on the desk beside scattered punch cards. The suicide note remained where it had been found, its typed characters crisp, and even in the machine's special sans serif font. Poirot bent close, green eyes sharp. He touched nothing yet. Instead, he catalogued the position of the overturned cup, the exact angle at which the coffee had spilled, the single droplet that had landed on the note without smearing the ink. Order and method. Always. A soft footfall sounded behind him. Eleanor Lang stood in the doorway, wearing a soft grey wool coat over her dress, as though she had intended to walk the cold terrace, but changed her mind. She hesitated, then stepped inside and closed the door quietly. "You are examining his monument," she said, voice low. Her eyes flicked to the humming cabinet, then away. "Monument?" Poirot repeated gently. "Or perhaps the murder weapon itself, madame?" She gave a small, startled laugh, genuine for the first time. "You think the machine killed him?" "I think someone used the machine to help kill him, and to help cover the crime." He made a small expressive gesture toward the removed tubes. "These were taken out after he was already dead." "Why?" "To delay discovery of the sabotage, perhaps. Or to suggest Victor himself destroyed his own work in despair." Elna moved closer to the desk. Her fingers brushed the edge of the suicide note, but did not lift it. "He loved that thing more than he loved me," she whispered. Then, almost too softly to hear, "He was going to leave me. The papers were already drawn up. I would have received almost nothing." Poirot tilted his egg-shaped head. "And so you rejoiced? No? When you learned he was dead?" Her breath caught. She turned toward the window so he would not see her face clearly. Outside, rain streaked the glass in long silver lines. For several seconds, she said nothing. Then, very quietly, "I went out to the terrace last night. After 11. I needed air. I smoked a cigarette. I stood there thinking how peaceful it would be if he simply disappeared. Not dead, just gone. And then the scream came." She turned back. No tears. Only a strange, hollow relief in her eyes. "I did not kill him, Monsieur Poirot, but I cannot pretend I am broken." Poirot watched her carefully. The mask had slipped, not fallen, but lifted just enough for truth to show its edge. "Observe, mon ami," he murmured, as though speaking to an invisible companion. "The performance of grief was perfect last night. The shoulders shook, the handkerchief dabbed. But today, no handkerchief, no mascara to run. The body no longer needs to pretend. Relief performs its own small, honest gestures." He straightened. "You knew of the death before the maid discovered the body, did you not?" Eleanor's lips parted, then closed. She gave the tiniest nod. Poirot continued softly. "I am reminded of the Ackroyd affair, many years ago in England. A man performed shock so convincingly, widened eyes, dropped jaw, trembling voice, that even I, Hercule Poirot, felt a moment's doubt. Oh, he had rehearsed before mirrors for days. Practiced the gasp, the stagger, the hand pressed to the heart. Yet when the moment came to light a cigarette, his fingers remained perfectly steady. A truly shocked man's hand betrays him. It shakes. The body remembers the truth, even when the face lies. Here too, madam, your grief was costume, beautifully tailored, but costume nonetheless." Eleanor sank into the leather chair Victor had occupied only the night before. The coat slipped from her shoulders to pool around her like spilled ink. "I heard nothing," she said dully. "I stood on the terrace. I smoked. I wished him gone. Then the scream. That was all." Poirot nodded once. "The first crack has appeared, small, but significant. Humans wear masks because the world demands them. And the widow must grieve even when her heart dances with secret relief. The partner must mourn even as he calculates tomorrow's profit margin. The assistant must appear loyal even while passion burns beneath. We put on these performances because naked truth would shatter the fragile roles society has assigned us: wife, friend, protege, servant. Yet every mask is heavy. The arms tire, the shoulders sag. One day, or one night, the actor forgets to hold the pose. A cigarette is lit with steady fingers. A sigh of relief escapes on a cool terrace. Light slips beneath the door, and truth begins its quiet entrance. The psychology is simple, yet profound. We lie first to ourselves. We tell ourselves we are good, we are loyal, we are innocent. The mask becomes skin. But guilt, or relief, or hatred has its own pulse, and it beats beneath the performance until the rhythm can no longer be ignored. Then comes the slip, the missed cue, the moment when the rehearsed lines falter and something real, something dangerous shows through. In every theater of crime, the first act ends the same way, not with a shout, not with handcuffs, but with a single, almost invisible fracture. A mask that no longer fits quite perfectly. Poirot arranged the removed vacuum tubes in a neat line beside the suicide note. Symmetry restored. The first act has concluded, he said to the empty room, to the humming machine, to the woman who no longer pretended. Some masks have cracked, more will follow. The first mask cracked, more would follow. Chapter 4. Rehearsed lines. By late afternoon, the rain had eased to a fine mist that clung to the windows of Lung Mansion like a soft grey veil. And inside, the atmosphere had thickened. The drawing room, once a stage of elegant boys, now felt smaller, warmer, almost oppressive. The fire burned steadily, sending curls of wood smoke into the air to mingle with the faint sweetness of dying lilies and the sharper note of strong coffee left cooling in porcelain cups. Crystal chandeliers tinkled faintly whenever someone moved too quickly across the parquet floor. Hercule Poirot had decided the time had come to apply pressure, not with accusations yet, but with questions shaped like mirrors. Each suspect would be forced to look at their own performance and see where the lines no longer fit. He began with Marcus Hale in the library. The business partner entered without knocking, tweed jacket unbuttoned now, kid gloves discarded somewhere, and he dropped heavily into the chair opposite Poirot and lit a cigar with hands that were no longer quite so steady. "You've been busy, Poirot," Marcus said, exhaling a plume of rich Cuban smoke. "Digging, asking, making people nervous." "Merely observing, monsieur." Poirot arranged 3 pencils on the desk in perfect alignment. "You told me you worked late in the guest wing, preparing documents." Yet the maid heard heavy footsteps descending the main staircase at 11:15. Not ascending, descending. Marcus drew on the cigar. "I told you." She was mistaken. "Mais non. She's quite certain she carried fresh linens." She paused on the landing because the footsteps were loud, hurried. A man in a hurry does not walk so carefully when he believes no one watches. Marcus's jaw tightened. "What are you implying?" "I imply nothing. I observe." "You also said Victor was like a brother." "Yet brothers do not empty a wall, safe of certain ledgers, the night before a demonstration. Ledgers that show adjustments. Creative accounting, perhaps?" The cigar paused halfway to Marcus's mouth. "You've been in the safe." "I have seen the dust outline where papers once lay, and I have spoken with the bank this morning. Large transfers, unexplained, to an account in the name of Hale Ventures, a company not yet registered." Marcus exhaled slowly. Smoke drifted between them like a curtain. Victor knew. He was going to expose me. Millions, Poirot. The algorithm caught the discrepancies before I could correct them. He said he would give me 24 hours to explain. Then he would go to the board. "And so you acted first." "I did not kill him." The words came too fast, too loud, and the performance cracked at the edges. I argued with him. Yes, in the study, around 10:30. But I left him alive, I swear it. Poirot tilted his head. You left him alive, and locked the door behind you? Marcus froze. The key, Poirot continued softly. It was in the lock from the inside when the body was found. Yet you say you left him alive. How does a living man lock the door after his visitor departs? Marcus's cigar trembled. Ash fell unnoticed onto his tweed sleeve. Next, Poirot summoned Lila Voss to the small morning room. She arrived clutching a soft wool shawl against the chill that seemed to come from inside rather than the weather. Her black silk dress looked crumpled now, as though she had not changed since the night before. Miss Voss, Poirot began gently, your letter to Mr. Lang was most eloquent. I cannot bear to see you destroy yourself over this machine. Let me take the burden. Let me love you, as you deserve. Color rose in her cheeks. It was private. Private becomes public when murder is on stage. He leaned forward. You say the final run succeeded. Yet Victor confided in Dr. Finch that the algorithm had begun to fail. Inconsistent predictions, erratic outputs. Why would he lie to his rival, but not to you, his closest collaborator? Lila twisted the shawl in her hands. He was tired, paranoid. The pressure. Or perhaps, Poirot said quietly, someone had tampered with the sequencing cards. Subtly. Just enough to make the machine unreliable. Just enough to drive a perfectionist to despair. Her eyes widened. You think I think passion makes people do desperate things. You loved him. He did not love you in return. Perhaps you wish to save him from his obsession. By making the obsession fail? Lila shook her head violently. No, never. I only wanted him to see me. Her voice broke. The rehearsed calm of the devoted assistant faltered. Real tears, hot, sudden, spilled down her cheeks. She covered her face with trembling hands. Poirot watched without speaking. The mask of innocence was slipping badly now. Dr. Finch came last to the terrace, despite the lingering mist. He stood with his back to the house, hands in the pockets of his grey overcoat, sandalwood cologne sharp against the damp air. You are very calm, Doctor, Poirot observed, stepping out beside him. Most men would show some strain after 24 hours in a house of suspicion. Finch gave a small smile. I have nothing to hide. Yet you sent a telegram at 10:45 last night. Problem resolved. Proceed as planned. To your laboratory. What problem? Precisely. A minor patent issue. Routine. Poirot touched his magnificent moustache thoughtfully. Routine messages are not sent in code at nearly 11 o'clock at night, unless the sender believes the matter urgent or secret. Finch turned slowly. You're reaching, Poirot. Am I, or are you performing the role of detached observer a little too perfectly? A rival who arrives the very day the genius dies. A rival who benefits most from the removal of Victor Lang and his troublesome algorithm. Finch's smile faded. For the first time, his composure showed fine cracks, tight lips, a slight flare of nostrils. Rehearsed lines began to falter everywhere. Alibis bent under pressure like thin scripts read too many times. Marcus's steady hands shook when he stubbed out his cigar. Leela's tears were no longer part of any performance. Finch's calm developed a tremor at the edges. Poirot returned to the drawing room alone. The fire had burned low, leaving only glowing embers. Rain tapped once more at the windows, softer now, almost apologetic. He arranged the silver coffee pot, 2 empty cups, and a single crystal ashtray until everything stood in perfect order. Truth needs no rehearsal, he murmured to the empty room. Lies, however, they must be practiced, over and over, until the actor believes them himself. But repetition breeds fatigue. The tongue trips, the hand hesitates, the mask grows heavy. Outside, the mist thickened into fog. Rehearsed lines began to falter. The script was failing. Chapter 5. The mask slips. The fog had lifted by early evening, and leaving the air cold and sharp outside Lang Mansion. Inside, however, the warmth of the drawing room felt almost suffocating. The fire roared high now, casting long shadows across the velvet curtains and polished mahogany. The scent of burning cedar mingled with the last traces of dying lilies, strong continental coffee, and the faint, acrid bite of cigar smoke that still clung to Marcus Hale's tweed jacket. Hercule Poirot had chosen this moment carefully. The cast was tired. Rehearsed lines had worn thin, performances strained at the seams. He would confront the man whose mask had begun to crack widest. He summoned Marcus Hale to Victor's private study, the very room where the tragedy had unfolded. The lung algorithm stood silent now, its cabinet doors still ajar, vacuum tubes lined up like fallen soldiers on the desk, and the suicide note remained untouched, a silent witness. The overturned coffee cup had been removed, but a faint brownish stain lingered on the mahogany, like a ghost. Marcus entered without knocking. His broad shoulders filled the doorway. His face looked drawn, eyes shadowed. He no longer carried the kid gloves. His hands hung loose at his sides, fingers flexing unconsciously. "Sit, monsieur," Poirot said quietly, indicating the high-backed leather chair Victor had occupied the night before. Marcus hesitated, then sank into it. The leather creaked under his weight. He stared at the suicide note, as though it might speak. Poirot remained standing, small and precise, green eyes gleaming in the firelight. He made no move toward the desk. Instead, he began to pace slowly. 3 steps one way, 3 steps back, hands clasped behind him. "Do you plead the loyal friend with such conviction, Mr. Hale?" he said at last. The handshake that lingered, the voice that cracked on cue when you spoke of brotherhood, the pacing before the fire, perfectly timed to show restless grief. Bravo! A magnificent performance. Marcus swallowed. "I don't know what you're getting at." "Oh, but you do." Poirot stopped directly in front of him. "Loyalty does not empty a wall safe of incriminating ledgers at 11 o'clock at night. Loyalty does not forge transfers to a shadow company. Loyalty does not argue with a man in this very room at 10:30, then leave him alive, only for that man to be found dead an hour later with the door locked from the inside." Marcus's jaw worked. "I told you, we argued. He gave me 24 hours. I left. He was breathing when I walked out." Poirot tilted his egg-shaped head. "And the door? How does a living man lock himself in after his visitor departs?" Silence stretched. The fire popped. A single spark drifted upward. Marcus's hands gripped the arms of the chair. Knuckles whitened. I came back. Later. Around midnight. I wanted to talk again. To beg. The door was unlocked. I entered. He was already gone. Cyanide. The note was there. I panicked. I locked the door from inside with my handkerchief so no fingerprints. Then I slipped out through the French windows to the terrace. I thought, if it looked like suicide. Poirot's voice remained gentle, almost kind. "You thought the police would accept despair, overwork, a genius broken by his creation. But you overlooked one small detail, monsieur. At the typewriter, the Lang algorithm itself uses a very distinctive typeface. The suicide note was typed in that face, yet the machine's printing mechanism had already been sabotaged. Several key rods bent. It could not have typed a single clean line after 10 o'clock. Only someone who knew the sabotage had occurred could have produced that note, and only the murderer would know exactly when the machine became silent. Marcus's shoulders began to shake, not with theatrical grief, but with something raw, real. His head dropped forward. A low sound escaped him, half sob, half groan. Poirot stepped closer. You did not merely embezzle, Mr. Hale. You destroyed the very thing Victor loved most. You tampered with his algorithm. Subtly at first, altered punch cards, removed tubes under cover of night. You drove him toward breakdown so the board would question his sanity, not your accounts. When he discovered the extent of it, when he confronted you, you saw no other path. Marcus lifted his head. Tears, genuine, hot, ran unchecked down his cheeks. He was going to ruin me. Everything. My name. My future. I argued. I begged. He wouldn't listen. He said he would call the authorities in the morning. I had the cyanide capsule in my pocket. From the war, for emergencies. I crushed it into his coffee, while he turned to the window. He drank. He convulsed. I typed the note on my portable typewriter. I carried it in my briefcase. Then I swapped it for his machine's output later, in the confusion. I thought no one would check the mechanism so soon. His voice cracked completely. I didn't want to kill him. I just wanted him silent. Poirot stood motionless. The firelight played across his face, highlighting the satisfaction in his green eyes. Observe, he murmured, as though to an invisible audience. The mask has fallen at last. Beneath the loyal friend, beneath the steady hand and rehearsed outrage, lies the true face. Fear dressed as ambition, greed wearing the costume of brotherhood. The performance held until pressure became too great. Then, crack, the lines failed. Truth emerged, raw and unscripted. Marcus slumped forward, head in hands. Sobs shook his broad frame. No more polish, no more control. Only a man stripped bare. Poirot made a small expressive gesture with his neat hands. You watch with Poirot. No. You see how guilt always betrays the actor in the end. The body cannot lie forever. The hands tremble. The voice breaks when the eyes no longer meet yours. The carefully constructed role collapses under its own weight. He turned toward the window. Outside, the night had grown clear. Stars pricked the black sky above the hills. The crucial insight, Poirot continued softly, is this. A man may rehearse grief, loyalty, shock, but he cannot rehearse the moment when the mask is torn away. That instant belongs to truth alone. He straightened, drawing himself up to his full, still modest, height. The mask had fallen. Beneath it, the true face at last. The mask had fallen. The true face emerged. Chapter 6. Behind the curtain night had fallen completely over the Palo Alto hills. Lung Mansion stood quiet now, its Art Deco windows glowing like amber panels against the dark. Inside the drawing room, the fire had settled to a steady, low burn. Its cedar logs popped occasionally, sending sparks upward to die against the soot-blackened chimney. The air held the comforting weight of furniture wax, the last breath of hothouse lilies wilting in their silver vase, and the faint, lingering bite of Cuban cigar smoke that Marcus Hale had left behind hours earlier. Hercule Poirot moved alone through the great house like a director inspecting an empty stage after the audience has gone. He carried no notebook, only the little grey cells, turning, fitting fragments together. The study door stood open now, no longer locked, no longer a sealed tomb. He entered without haste. On Victor's desk, the suicide note still lay, its crisp typeface mocking the room's silence. Beside it, the removed vacuum tubes caught the firelight in tiny glassy reflections. Poirot lifted one gently between thumb and forefinger, turned it, set it down again in perfect alignment with the others. Order restored, if only for a moment. He crossed to the small wall, safe behind a framed patent certificate. The door hung ajar. Inside, empty velvet-lined shelves showed only faint dust outlines where ledgers once rested. Marcus had taken them, yes, but someone else had known exactly where to look. Poirot's green eyes narrowed. He reached deeper and withdrew a single folded sheet that had slipped behind the back panel. A letter, handwritten in Lila Voss's neat, slanted script. "My dearest Victor," it began. "I know what Marcus has done. The altered cards, the missing funds. I kept silent because I thought you would forgive him. Because you always forgave those you loved. But he plans to destroy the algorithm completely if you expose him. Meet me tonight on the terrace after 11. I have proof. I will give it to you. Please, let me help you end this." The letter carried yesterday's date. No signature line, only a hurried postscript. "Burn this. He watches everything." Poirot folded the paper carefully and slipped it into his pocket. He moved to the French windows that opened onto the terrace. Rain had left the stone flags, slick and gleaming, under the outdoor lanterns. He stepped out into the chill night air, closing the door softly behind him. Eleanor Long stood there, wrapped in a thick wool shawl, the color of smoke. She did not startle when she saw him. Instead, she offered a small, tired smile. "You knew I would come here," she said. "Madame, the terrace is where masks slip most easily. No audience. I know lines to remember. Only cold air and honest thoughts." She nodded. "I came out here last night. After the argument with Victor, I heard raised voices from the study, Marcus's mostly. Then silence. I waited. I smoked. I wished terrible things. Then the scream." Poirot joined her at the balustrade. "You were not alone in your knowledge, Madame. Miss Voss knew of the embezzlement. She tried to warn your husband. She left a letter in the safe, slipped behind the ledgers so Marcus would not find it." Eleanor's breath caught. "Lila? She loved him. More than I ever could." "Love performs many roles," Poirot murmured. "Sometimes devotion, sometimes obsession, sometimes blackmail." He turned back toward the house. Through the glass, he could see the faint glow of the study lamp. The silhouette of the Lang algorithm, like a sleeping giant. "Behind every curtain," he said softly, "a secret waits. Marcus embezzled to fund his own company. You planned divorce because love had long since cooled to indifference. Lila blackmailed Marcus with proof of the fraud, hoping to force Victor's attention back to her. Even Worthing, the faithful butler, knew of an affair you conducted last spring with a young venture capitalist from San Francisco. He kept silent out of loyalty, or perhaps out of hope that silence would preserve his position." Eleanor wrapped the shawl tighter. How much did Victor know? Enough to confront Marcus. Enough to begin dismantling the machine himself, removing tubes, bending rods, so the fraud could not be hidden behind false predictions. He planned to expose everything in the morning. That is why the note was forged. and to silence him before he could speak. She looked out over the dark hills. We all wore masks for him and for ourselves. Humans construct these performances not merely to deceive others, but to survive the mirror. We tell ourselves we are loyal when resentment festers. We play devoted when indifference has already taken root. We feign innocence when obsession burns hottest. The mask becomes armor against judgment, against loss, against the terrifying possibility that we are not who we pretend to be. Yet armor is heavy. It chafes. It restricts breath. Sooner or later, the wearer must loosen a strap, shift a plate, and in that small adjustment, truth peeks through. I recall the case of the Nile steamer many years ago. A woman performed wifely devotion so flawlessly. Tender glances, gentle touches, the murmured endearments, that even her husband believed her love renewed. Yet each night, alone in her cabin, she wrote letters to her lover, planning his murder so she might inherit and run away together. She rehearsed every line of grief for this day the body would be found. She practiced tears before the looking glass. But one evening, as the boat docked at Luxor, she forgot herself for a single moment, laughed aloud at a private joke while standing over her sleeping husband. That laugh, genuine, cruel, relieved, betrayed her more surely than any fingerprint or footprint. The body cannot sustain the lie indefinitely. The mask slips when the actor believes no one watches. Here, too, the psychology unfolds the same way. Greed dresses as friendship. Relief masquerades as sorrow. Obsession cloaks itself in loyalty. But secrets breed connections, hidden letters, whispered conversations, stolen glances, and those connections form the backstage of every human drama. Pull one thread, and the curtain tears. Poirot stepped back inside, closing the French windows against the night chill. The fire welcomed him with a fresh crackle of warmth. Every secret has a motive, he said to the empty room, to the silent machine, to the ghosts still lingering in the air. And every motive wears a mask until the spotlight finds it. Behind every curtain, a secret. Every secret, a motive. Chapter 7. The Final Act. Dusk settled over Lang Mansion like the slow lowering of house lights before the curtain's final rise. The drawing room had been prepared with deliberate care. Every chair arranged in a precise semicircle facing the marble fireplace, crystal glasses untouched on silver trays. The fire built high, so flames danced gold and steady across polished mahogany and velvet. The scent of cedar smoke blended with the last faint sweetness of wilting lilies and the rich, dark aroma of fresh continental coffee waiting in porcelain pots. Outside, the night pressed cold against the tall windows. Inside, warmth and tension filled the space like an audience holding its breath. Hercule Poirot stood before the assembled cast, small, immaculate, commanding. His egg-shaped head tilted slightly. Green eyes moved from face to face with the calm of a director who has already seen the final scene in rehearsal. Elena Lang sat rigid in midnight silk, hands folded too tightly in her lap. Lila Voss clutched the arm of her chair, knuckles pale. Dr. Harold Finch maintained his usual composure, and though a fine bead of perspiration gleamed at his temple. James Worthing stood near the door, straight-backed and silent as always. Marcus Hale occupied the central chair, pale, unshaven, eyes hollow after the afternoon's confession. Poirot made a small expressive gesture with his neat hands, drawing every gaze to him. Mesdames et messieurs, he began, voice soft yet carrying to every corner of the room. You have each performed for Hercule Poirot, some with truth, some with desperate artifice. Tonight the curtain rises for the last time. Let us review the performances, calmly, methodically, without illusion. He turned first to Elena. Mrs. Lang, you played the grieving widow with technical brilliance. The trembling shoulders, the dry-eyed dabbing of the handkerchief, the soft, broken voice. Magnifique. No, but grief does not rejoice in private on a cold terrace, while smoking a cigarette and whispering of relief. You knew your husband was dead before the maid screamed. You wished him gone. Divorce papers were already prepared. Your mask was sorrow. Beneath it, freedom. Eleanor's lips parted, but no sound came. She looked down at her hands. Poirot moved Delilah. Miss Voss, you performed the innocent, devoted assistant. Wide eyes, trembling fingers, passionate loyalty to a genius you adored. Yet innocent assistants do not hide letters of warning in wall safes. They do not blackmail business partners with proof of embezzlement in the hope of winning love. Your role was devotion, your true motive, obsession. Lila gave a small choked sound. Tears welled again, real this time, no performance left. Next, Dr. Finch. Doctor, you played the respectful rival, detached, professional, a man above petty jealousy. Yet respectful rivals do not send coded telegrams at 11 o'clock at night saying problem resolved, proceed as planned. They do not arrive the very day a competitor dies. They do not celebrate in secret when the greatest obstacle to their own patent vanishes. Your calm was a costume. Beneath it, ambition sharpened to a blade. Finch's composure cracked at last. He reached for his handkerchief, fingers unsteady. Poirot turned to Worthing. Even you, Worthing, performed loyalty to perfection, silent service, unquestioning obedience. Yet faithful butlers do not keep silent about a mistress's affair when that knowledge could protect or destroy the household. You watched. You waited. Your role was invisibility. Your secret, quiet complicity. Worthing inclined his head once, the smallest acknowledgement. Finally, Poirot faced Marcus Hale. And so we come to our leading performer. Mr. Hale, you gave the most convincing performance of all. The loyal friend, the shocked partner, the helpful grieving brother. You paced, you smoked, you offered alibis with steady voice and steady hand. Bravo, magnifique. But you made one fatal error, one small fatal slip when the mask wavered. He stepped closer. The firelight caught the gleam in his eyes. You forged the suicide note. You claimed you typed it on your portable machine, then swapped it later. But the note was in the Lang algorithm's distinctive typeface, clean, even, unmistakable. The machine's printing mechanism had already been sabotaged by 10 o'clock. Several rods bent, incapable of producing a single perfect line. Only the person who committed the murder, who crushed cyanide into Victor's coffee at 10:45, who watched him die, who then typed the note before leaving and locking the door from inside, could have known the machine was already useless. Only the murderer could produce that note in that face at that hour. Marcus stared at the carpet. No denial, no defense, only silence. Poirot drew himself up, small yet towering in the firelight. You argued with Victor at 10:30. He refused to give you time. You saw ruin, prison, disgrace. You carried the cyanide capsule from the war. You dropped it into his coffee while his back was turned. He drank, he died. You typed the note on the still functional machine. Your last act before the sabotage, you yourself had begun days earlier, became permanent. You locked the door from inside with a handkerchief to avoid prints, slipped out through the French windows to the terrace, and rejoined the household as the shocked friend. The room held its breath. The grandfather clock in the hall chimed once, deep, final. The performance is over, Poirot said quietly. The curtain falls. The truth takes her bow. He made one last small gesture toward Marcus. The police wait in the hall, monsieur. They will take you now. Marcus rose slowly, legs unsteady. Two officers stepped forward from the doorway. Handcuffs clicked softly. Metallic, final. He did not resist. As they led him away, he paused once at the threshold and looked back, not at Poirot, but at the silent lung algorithm, its lights forever dark. No one spoke. The fire crackled. Champagne had sparkled here only nights before, and now only justice remained. Poirot turned to the others. You have all played your parts, some falsely, some foolishly. But the theater of crime has one law. Every actor eventually forgets their lines. Tonight, those lines have been spoken, the masks removed. Only truth survives the curtain call. The final act concluded. Only truth survived the curtain call. Chapter 8, Curtain Call. Dawn broke pale and cold over the Palo Alto hills on the morning after the revelation. Lang Mansion, once a glittering stage of ambition and elegance, now felt strangely hushed, like a theater after the audience has filed out and the ushers have begun sweeping up programs. The drawing room stood empty, except for the lingering scent of cedar smoke from the dying fire, the faint perfume of wilting lilies, and the clean, niche-shop aroma of strong coffee that Worthing had quietly prepared and left on the sideboard in silver pots. Crystal chandeliers caught the first weak sunlight and sent tiny prisms dancing across polished mahogany and velvet curtains. The police had taken Marcus Hale away shortly after midnight. Handcuffs had clicked with quiet finality. His broad shoulders had sagged as he was led through the front doors into the waiting black sedan. He did not look back. No final dramatic gesture. No plea. Only the slow closing of the car door and the crunch of tires on gravel as the vehicle disappeared down the winding drive. Eleanor Lang appeared first in the morning light. She had changed from her midnight silk into a simple grey wool dress, practical, unadorned. No more performance of the grieving widow, and she stood at the tall window overlooking the terrace, arms folded loosely, watching mist rise from the wet grass. When Poirot entered, carrying a small tray with 2 cups of steaming coffee, she turned without surprise. You did not sleep, madame? He asked gently, setting the tray on a low table. Sleep would have been dishonest. She accepted the cup. The porcelain was warm against her fingers. I kept waiting for the grief to come. Real grief. It never arrived. Only relief and guilt for feeling it. Poirot sipped his own coffee, rich, continental, exactly as he preferred. Relief is honest, madame. Guilt for relief is merely another mask society hands us. You may remove it now. She gave a small, almost surprised laugh. You make it sound simple. Simple? Non. Necessary? Oui. Lila Voss entered next, the eyes red-rimmed but clearer than they had been in days. She wore the same black silk dress, now creased and tired-looking. She hesitated at the doorway, then crossed to Elena and touched her arm lightly. I'm sorry, Lila said quietly, for the letter, for the blackmail, for thinking I could force him to see me. Eleanor covered Lila's hand with her own. We were all performing for him, in different ways. None of us saw the whole play until the curtain fell. Lila nodded. Tears came again, not theatrical, not forced, but quiet and cleansing. She wiped them away with the back of her hand. No linen handkerchief, no careful dabbing, just honest feeling at last. Dr. Harold Finch arrived shortly after, valise already packed and waiting by the front door. His grey suit remained immaculate. His sandalwood cologne drifted faintly as he moved, yet the calm detachment had cracked. He looked older in the morning light, lines deeper around the eyes, mouth tighter. I've spoken with the police, he said without preamble. They have no evidence I was directly involved, only opportunistic hope. I will return to Menlo Park this afternoon. My own work continues. Poirot inclined his head. Ambition is not a crime, Doctor. Celebrating too soon, however, that is poor theatre. Finch gave a wry smile, the first genuine expression Poirot had seen from him. I underestimated you, Monsieur Poirot, and I overestimated myself. He offered his hand. Poirot shook it once, firm, brief. Finch collected his valise and left without another word. The front door closed softly behind him. A chapter ended. James Worthing moved through the house like a man released from a long role. He straightened cushions, cleared coffee cups, polished already spotless silver trays. Yet his movements carried a new lightness. No more silent watching. No more invisible loyalty stretched to breaking. Poirot found him in the hallway, arranging fresh flowers, simple white roses this time, in a crystal vase. You will remain in service here, Worthing? For a time, sir. Mrs. Long has asked me to stay until the house is sold. After that, I have family in Oregon. A small farm, quiet, no masks required. Poirot touched his magnificent moustache thoughtfully. Quiet is good. Masks are heavy. You have carried yours long enough. Worthing inclined his head. Thank you, sir, for seeing everything. By mid-morning, the mansion had begun its slow transformation from crime scene to empty stage. Police photographers had finished their work days earlier. Fingerprint powder had been wiped away. The Lang algorithm remained in the study, silent, dark. Its vacuum tubes still lined up like fallen actors after the final bow. No one had yet decided its fate. Eleanor walked Poirot to the front doors when his taxi arrived. The air outside was crisp, carrying the scent of wet pine and distant eucalyptus. Sunlight slanted through the trees, turning droplets on leaves into tiny diamonds. You will return to Europe soon? She asked. The Orient Express awaits. There are always new theaters, new performances. She hesitated, then spoke softly. Thank you, not just for finding the truth, for allowing us to stop pretending. Poirot made a small, expressive gesture with his neat hands. The curtain call is never easy, madame, but it is necessary. No applause follows, only justice. And sometimes, occasionally, peace. She watched as he stepped into the taxi. The driver closed the door. The engine purred to life. Gravel crunched once more. Inside the house, Eleanor turned back toward the drawing room. Lila waited there, holding 2 fresh cups of coffee. Worthing had already lit a small fire against the morning chill. The chandelier caught the light and sent gentle prisms across the parquet. The performance had ended. The masks lay discarded. What remained was simpler. 3 people in an empty house, no longer acting, beginning, at last, to live. No applause for this performance, only justice. Chapter 9. After the show. Several weeks had passed since the curtain fell on the tragedy at Lang Mansion. The Palo Alto hills had traded autumn's golden haze for the sharper clarity of early winter. Fog still drifted through the pines in the mornings, but the air carried a clean bite now, no longer heavy with suspicion. The great Art Deco house stood quiet on its wooded rise, windows shuttered against the chill, driveway swept clean of gravel, tracks left by police cars and reporters. Inside, the transformation was almost complete. The drawing room, once lit for dramatic confrontations, now held only soft daylight, filtering through half-drawn velvet curtains. The crystal chandeliers had been covered with muslin dust sheets. The silver vases stood empty, no more hot house lilies or white roses to perfume the air. A faint scent of furniture wax lingered, mixed with the comforting smell of fresh brewed coffee that Worthing still prepared each morning out of habit. The grandfather clock in the hall ticked steadily, no longer marking scenes, but simply counting ordinary hours. Eleanor Lang moved through the rooms with a new, unhurried purpose. She wore a simple tweed skirt and cashmere sweater, practical textures against the cold marble floors and polished mahogany panels. No silk gowns rustled anymore. No performance required. She had begun the slow work of dismantling a life built on roles she no longer wished to play. In the study, the lung algorithm had been carefully packed for transport. Its towering cabinet of vacuum tubes and punch card readers now waited in crates lined with felt, ready for donation to Stanford University's emerging computer laboratory. A team of engineers had arrived the previous day to supervise the move. They spoke in hushed, reverent tones about the machine's potential, as though handling a sacred relic rather than the silent witness to murder. Eleanor watched them work from the doorway, arms folded loosely. "It will live on," she said later to Lila Voss, who had come to help sort papers, not as Victor's obsession, but as something useful, something that doesn't destroy people. Lila nodded. She had cut her hair shorter since that night, a practical bob that framed her face without artifice. Her black silk dresses had been replaced by wool jumpers and sensible skirts. The trembling hands and wide, pleading eyes were gone. What remained was quiet determination. "I've accepted a position in San Francisco," Lila told Elena as they packed files in the library. "A small computing firm. They're building something new, less about predicting stocks, more about solving real problems. I start next month." Eleanor smiled, the first unguarded smile in months. "Good. You deserve a stage where the spotlight doesn't burn." They worked in companionable silence for a while. Books slid into boxes. Ledgers were sorted, and some burned in the small fireplace. The flames crackled warmly, consuming the last traces of Marcus's embezzlement records. No drama accompanied the act, just quiet closure. James Worthing moved through the house one final time before departure. He polished the last silver tray until it gleamed, arranged the few remaining pieces of furniture with geometric precision, then stood in the hallway looking up at the grand staircase. His black coat hung neatly on the hall stand, or a small valise waited by the door. "Everything is in order, Mrs. Lang," he said when she found him there. "The house will be ready for the estate agent tomorrow." Eleanor touched his arm lightly. "And you?" "Oregon awaits." He nodded. "A small farm near Eugene. My sister and her family. Chickens, a garden. No more trays to carry, no more secrets to keep. You served faithfully," she said, "even when loyalty cost you." Worthing's expression softened. "I served a house, madame. Not always the people in it. Now I go to serve myself." He picked up the valise. The front door opened onto crisp winter air. He paused on the threshold, looked back once at the empty foyer, then stepped out. The taxi waited at the bottom of the steps. Gravel crunched softly as he walked away. By late afternoon, the house stood truly empty. Eleanor locked the study door one last time, the same door that had once been locked from inside. She slipped the key into her pocket and walked through the drawing room, trailing her fingers along the velvet curtains. The fire had burned down to embers. She did not relight it. Outside on the terrace, she stood for a long moment, coat collar turned up against the chill. The hills rolled away in shades of gray and green. Distant rooftops of Palo Alto caught the last slanting light. No cigarette this time. No whispered wishes for escape. Only quiet acceptance. She had sold the mansion to a young technology entrepreneur who planned to turn it into a research retreat. The proceeds would fund a small foundation in Victor's name, not for algorithms that predicted markets, but for scholarships in early computing for women and underrepresented students. A final, honest gesture. Lila joined her on the terrace. They stood side by side without speaking. The wind carried the scent of pine and distant wood smoke. "I thought I would feel lost," Eleanor said at last. "Without the house, without the role." "And do you?" "No, I feel lighter." Lila smiled faintly. "The theater has emptied, but the lessons stay." They watched the sun slip behind the hills. Shadows lengthened across the terrace stones. Somewhere far off, a train whistle sounded, low, mournful, carrying the promise of movement, of new places. Eleanor turned back toward the house one last time. The windows reflected the fading sky. No more spotlights, no more masks. The two women walked down the drive together. A car waited at the gate, Lila's ride to the city. Yelena would follow tomorrow, to a small apartment in San Francisco overlooking the bay. No grand salons, no crystal chandeliers, just ordinary rooms and ordinary days. The mansion receded behind them, elegant and silent. Its drama played out. The theater emptied. The lessons remained. Chapter 10. Poirot reviews the performance. The Orient Express glided smoothly through the European countryside, late winter light slanting across snow-dusted fields and bare vineyards. Inside his private compartment, Hercule Poirot sat in perfect comfort. A small table held a steaming cup of tisane, chamomile, lightly sweetened, and a single square of dark chocolate wrapped in gold foil. The rhythmic clack of wheels on rails provided a soothing counterpoint to the quiet thoughts turning in his mind. He had drawn the heavy velvet curtain halfway, though allowing just enough daylight to read by without glare. The compartment smelled faintly of polished wood, fine leather upholstery, and the clean herbal scent of his tisane. A folded newspaper lay beside him, San Francisco Chronicle, several weeks old now, forwarded by a friend in the city. The article was brief. Silicon Valley tycoon's death-ruled homicide. Business partner charged with murder. Below it, a smaller notice. Lang algorithm donated to Stanford, expected to advance early computing research. No scandalous headlines, no dramatic photographs, only facts, presented with journalistic restraint. Poirot touched his magnificent moustache thoughtfully. He sipped the tisane, hot, soothing, and allowed the little grey cells to review the entire performance once more. Why do people perform rather than reveal the truth? And because the mask is comfortable. Society hands us roles at birth: devoted wife, loyal friend, brilliant protege, faithful servant. And we wear them until they fuse with the skin. We tell ourselves the role is who we are. Remove it, and we risk seeing the frightened, greedy, lonely creature beneath. Eleanor performed grief because a widow must grieve. Marcus performed loyalty because a partner must stand by his brother in arms. Lila performed innocence because a young assistant must appear devoted, not desperate. Even Finch played detached professionalism because a rival must never show envy. The mask protects. It shields us from judgment, from loss, from the terrifying freedom of being seen exactly as we are. Yet guilt always betrays the actor. The body cannot sustain the lie indefinitely, so hands tremble when they reach for a cigarette in faint shock. Eyes avoid contact when passion is disguised as duty. Voices catch on words rehearsed too perfectly. Marcus's steady hand in the first hours had been the tell. Eleanor's dry handkerchief another. Lila's trembling fingers when the letter was mentioned. Finch's too perfect calm. The little grey cells observe what others miss. The dry eyes in sorrow, the laughter in solitude, the sigh of relief on a cold terrace. These are not clues of footprints or fingerprints. They are clues of human nature, the psychology beneath the performance. I'm reminded once more of the Ackroyd affair, that dark business in an English village many years ago. There, too, a man performed innocence with such skill. Widened eyes, dropped jaw, voice cracking on cue, that even I felt a momentary doubt. He had rehearsed before mirrors, practiced the gasp, the stagger, the hand pressed to the heart. Yet when the moment came to light his pipe, his fingers remained rock steady. A truly shocked man's hand shakes. The body remembers what the face forgets. Here in California, the principle was the same. Marcus Hale performed shock and outrage with technical perfection, until the pressure mounted, until the lines faltered, until the mask tore away and greed stood naked in the firelight. The psychology of revelation is simple yet profound. Truth does not shout. It waits, patiently. It watches the actor rehearse, stumble, tire. It notes the single flaw, the bent printing rod no one else knew was damaged, the forged note in a typeface impossible after sabotage, the hurried footsteps the maid heard on the stairs. And truth collects these fragments until the pattern emerges. Then, in the final act, the spotlight finds the flaw. The curtain must fall. We all wear masks, mes amis. Some for love, some for greed, some for simple survival. The wife masks indifference with sorrow. The partner masks theft with brotherhood. The assistant masks obsession with loyalty. Society applauds the performance. It punishes the revelation. Yet the theater of life has one unbreakable rule. Every actor eventually forgets their lines. The tongue trips, the hand hesitates, the eyes betray, and in that instant, small, almost invisible, the truth steps forward and takes its bow. Poirot set the cup down with careful precision, aligning it exactly with the saucer's edge. He smoothed an imaginary wrinkle from his sleeve and gazed out at the passing landscape. Snow-covered hills gave way to distant mountains. The train carried him eastward, toward new cities, new mysteries. The Lang case had been elegant in its cruelty, ambition dressed as friendship, relief disguised as grief. A machine turned silent witness to human frailty. Yet it ended cleanly. Marcus would face justice. Eleanor had found peace in simplicity. Lila had discovered honest work. Worthing had chosen quiet fields over grand houses. The mansion itself would become something else, a place of learning rather than tragedy. The stage had emptied. The actors had removed their costumes. Only the lessons lingered, that masks are heavy, that truth waits patiently, that no performance can outrun the little grey cells forever. He permitted himself a small, satisfied smile. Until the next theatre of crime opens its doors, mes amis, There will always be another stage, another cast, another set of masks waiting to slip. Hercule Poirot will be watching. He lifted the tisane once more, savored the last warm sip, and let the steady rhythm of the train carry his thoughts into quiet repose. Until the next theatre of crime, mes amis, Poirot watches always.